Welcome to the Underline This podcast, the podcast where we unpack the big ideas, hiding in the margins. Because the best parts, they're between the lines. The first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. The second rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. Third rule, we don't talk about Fight Club enough. What? Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk spotlights the modern landmines of consumerism, masculinity, and existentialism into 218 pages of dark humor and storytelling. It's also, I think, an incredible film, definitely worth watching. There's a lot of protein in this book, and I've enjoyed preparing what I've learned for you. I'll give you a summary of the story as a first course to our discussion, and then we'll talk about the author's themes and symbolism found in the book. We'll unpack the movie versus the book and talk about my key takeaways. First, providing you with a high-level summary for those of us that live under a rock. Fight Club is about an unnamed narrator who suffers from insomnia and what I like to call Groundhog Day-like complex of living a meaningless, unfulfilled corporate job lifestyle. Sound familiar? To escape from the daily monotonous grind, he seeks out an unconventional method of escape by joining a variety of support groups for various illnesses. The irony, he doesn't actually suffer from any of these sicknesses. While attending these support groups, our no-name narrator meets Marla, who, funny enough, is there for the same reason he is, to take an emotional vacation and experience the warm feeling of belonging. Another pivotal character in Fight Club is one of my favorite characters, and that is Tyler Durden, a charismatic, intelligent, anti-materialist soap salesman. When No Name and Tyler first meet, it's bromance at first sight, and they form an underground fighting club, as one typically does when they have a bromance. And this Fight Club takes off and quickly spreads into an international organization with chapters recruiting men to reclaim their masculinity and symbolically gain their freedom from consumerism. You may remember the famous monologue from the film, the one where Brad Pitt, jacked as can be, says, "Welcome to Fight Club. The first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. The second rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. Third rule of Fight Club, if someone yells stop, goes limp, or taps out, the fight is over. Fourth rule, only two guys to a fight. Fifth rule, 1/5 at a time, fellas. Sixth rule, the fights are bare knuckle. No shirt, no shoes, no weapons. Seventh rule, fights will go on as long as they have to. And eighth and final rule, if this is your first time at Fight Club, you have to fight." I want to give that as a prerequisite, just so you can understand that Fight Club isn't just chaos. There are rules and standards that they try and live by, a code of conduct. Later on in this scene, Brad Pitt addresses the men and says, "Man, I see in Fight Club the strongest and smartest men who have ever lived. I see all this potential, and I see squandering. Gosh dang it, an entire generation pumping gas, waiting tables, slaves with white collars. Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy crap we don't need. We're the middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no great war, no great depression. Our great war is a spiritual war. Our great depression is our lives. We've all been raised on television to believe that one day we'd all be millionaires and movie gods and rock stars, but we won't. And we're slowly learning that fact. And we are very, very pissed off." Probably one of the best monologues I've seen in a film, up there with the Braveheart speech. As Fight Club comes to a fruition, men around the world begin meeting to beat the frustration out of one another. As Fight Clubs gain popularity, it evolves. Tyler pulls a bait and switch and turns its members into a nationwide anarchist movement called Project Mayhem, which is designed to overthrow a capitalist consumer world society. And the narrator makes a big discovery, which is that he has split personality disorder, and that Tyler is a projection of the narrator's repressed desires and anger. Fight Club ends with the narrator attempting to kill Tyler by killing himself to end the chaos. Have no fear, he goes to heaven and tells us what it's like. Again, this is a story with dark humor. So let's get to know the author, Chuck Palahniuk. Chuck Palahniuk is an American novelist and journalist, best known for his dark, transgressive fiction, and was born in 1962 in a working-class family in Oregon. His childhood had lots of instability. His parents were divorced, and off and on, he lived with his grandparents. Prior to becoming a writer, he worked as a diesel mechanic and eventually a journalist. Now, despite being a journalist, it wasn't until Palahniuk was in his 30s that he began to pursue writing seriously. He studied and attended workshops with Tom Spanbauer. To give you a quick bio on Spanbauer, is that he was an author. He was known for punchy and dangerous writing. If you're not sure what dangerous writing is, simply stated, it's going into places you're afraid to go and writing them without hesitation or restraint. It's writing from your wounds using a minimalistic style. And don't be afraid of touching taboos when you're involved with dangerous writing. And it was this dangerous writing style that influenced our author in his brutally honest and unique writing. And here's how it shows up. There's brutal honesty found throughout the book, which is what makes up a lot of the dark humor. For example, the narrator admits to attending cancer support groups as a fraud just to fill something. There's a minimalist voice that really doesn't mince words. It's punchy and direct, meaning that's just short, quick phrase, powerful statements. And this is shown in the physical writing as well, where the fights that occur really don't go into abstract details. They're described through blood, broken teeth, and bruises. And there's a lot of touching of taboo topics, specifically around terrorism, anti-materialism, and self-destruction. And Palahniuk's style is characterized by minimalism, repetition, and taboos that often expose the absurdity of modern life, specifically around consumerism and social alienation. Now, continue with part 2 of influences behind Palahniuk writing Fight Club. Palahniuk would draw from personal experiences in his writing of Fight Club. The narrator's obsession with faking illnesses to satisfy his yearning for human connection actually came from the author attending support groups for terminally ill patients as a writing experiment. Now, another reading between the lines moment and applying this to the real world, anytime you see someone acting like a victim, that's the wiring for their need to feel human connection. Not always, but generally, yes. Now, regarding violence and catharsis, Palahniuk showed up on a Monday morning to work with a bruised and beaten face that came from a camping fight over the weekend. No coworkers asked or even acknowledged his bruises, and their silence inspired the idea of a secret rule-bound violence as a way of creating bonding. Now, for disillusionment with corporate America, Palahniuk experienced firsthand the alienation of cubicle culture and used that to channel the emptiness into the novel's criticisms of consumerist identity. I'm sure you've all seen memes on social media about corporate culture when it says, this is what corporate culture looks like, and then it's a picture of a dark room with cubicles. It's satire, but it's a bitter pill to swallow. That's actually kind of what it's like working in corporate America. Now, there are several strong literary influences for Fight Club, including Bret Easton Ellis, the author of American Psycho, Tom Spanbauer, who we mentioned earlier, and William Burroughs, author of Naked Lunch, and Anthony Burgess, author of A Clockwork Orange, coming up in another podcast. Now, this created a rich fusion of themes and ideas that would create a unique flavor for Palahniuk's writing. These themes highlight the darkness of consumerist excess, sparse writing styles, and shocking taboo critiques of materialism in modern society. The last major influence, I'll note, is the cultural and historical context of the 1990s. This was a decade marked by peace, prosperity, and cultural emptiness. Young men felt directionless, and Palahniuk tapped into this generalized malaise. With the rise of service jobs and increase in consumer culture, many men began questioning traditional masculinity. Fight Club became a projection of those responses to this ideological crisis. Anti-consumerist movements at that time consisted of punk, anarchism, and critiques of advertising. Now that we've set the stage, let's discuss execution and motive for writing Fight Club. Palahniuk wanted to write something dangerous. He wanted to write something shocking. A book that would push against traditional norms and safe storytelling. And that's why he wrote Fight Club. At its release, it was rejected for being too dark and disturbing. However, it struck a chord with readers who could relate to the feelings of being trapped by corporate America and feeling disillusioned with consumerism. That's a lot to swallow, so let's now break down the themes without being too redundant. First, consumerism versus identity. Image matters, but there's real danger when you look toward external things as a way of defining yourself. Now, what does that mean? I think once you become obsessed with your image and your possessions, then you're in trouble. Have you ever gone out to dinner and you see people that spend probably too much time taking pictures of the food and the restaurant rather than actually enjoying it? I'm sure you have. That's them curating their image. Now, I'm reminded by a funny clip from Wayne's World, if you're all familiar with that movie, when Wayne and Garth begin to do advertisements, which is clearly a funny take on brand placement. This all gets triggered when they're being told that since they signed a contract for their show and accepted money from their sponsor, the sponsor gets to make all of their creative decisions for them. When they're told this, it cuts to Garth, who's wearing all Reebok gear, a hat, a sweatband, a sweater, a t-shirt, pants, shoes. And when it cuts to him, you see him, he's reclined back, he's got his hands up on his head, and he says, "It's like people only do things to get paid. And that's just really sad." So you'll have to check out the blog of this because I got a great meme that I found of that. But continuing on, if you're like Pavlov's dog, salivating and begging for a paycheck so you can buy more things, or if you're getting yourself into debt for things you don't need, then your things basically own you. Think of this like a teeter-totter. Imagine you're sitting on one end and all your things are on the other side. Who's really got more control in this situation? Is it really you? Are you the one that's dictating which has more weight than the other? Let's zoom out for a moment and narrow the scope to the United States, which is arguably the capital of the world for consumerism. According to the Motley Fool, the United States alone has 1.2 trillion with a T dollars worth of credit card debt as of Q1 of 2025. Just to put this into perspective, the credit card debt is bigger than the GDP of countries like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the Netherlands. The need to buy is winning the battle of just enough. Remember these words by Tyler Durden. The things you own end up owning you. You are not your job. You are not how much money you have in the bank. You are not the car you drive. You are not the contents of your wallet. You are your freaking khakis. Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy crap we don't need. You'll notice I paraphrase there, but I want to make this a kid-friendly podcast. Next, masculinity and violence. Modern men, lost, disillusioned, and searching for identity, turn to violence as an action of rebellion and rebirth in this story. Whether it be in sports or war, some of the strongest bromances and brotherhoods come through blood and bruises that they can wear as badges of honor, which really isn't much different from the real world. In 2025, between 2 and 3 million people practice jiu-jitsu regularly. It's a great exercise. You learn these self-defense skills, but a big draw towards joining a jiu-jitsu club is the empowerment that comes from getting back to primal roots, to fighting. And that's what Fight Club essentially is. It's an emancipation from modern society and for men to go back to those primal roots of fight and survival. When you're at Fight Club, you're not thinking about work. You're thinking about fighting. Men gather to beat each other bloody as a way to reclaim a sense of physicality and brotherhood absent in their lives. The club has its own code of conduct and honor, which formalizes the belonging to a tribe. Now, this represents a ritualized attempt to redefine masculinity outside the system of work and consumption. It's pursuing a path of discomfort and the pain that members endure upon initiation. It's a tool of influence called the initiation effect, and you can read about this in the book Influence. I recommend it. When members sacrifice or have to prove themselves through an initiation, they place higher value on the organization once they're accepted. And that reminds me of Tyler's philosophy about pain. He says, without pain, without sacrifice, we would have nothing. Violence becomes a path to meaning and a rejection of comfort culture. I had a similar experience with kind of that euphoria that these men get from attending Fight Club and being able to just kind of escape from the world for a moment. And that's when I would go rock climbing with a group outside of work. I enjoyed the opportunity to get outside, enjoy nature, and be put in a perilous position with safeguards, a rope, of course. Now, when you're holding up on the side of a mountain, where if you fell without a rope, you'd be turned to a fleshy spilt soup on the ground, you're not thinking of work. And it's a good reminder to be reminded of your mortality, your primal skills, and to find a place for belonging with other people. Now, fighting, or in my case, rock climbing, becomes a way to feel alive and live in the present moment. There's a spiritual cleansing that comes from the members that participate in Fight Club. Now, referencing the book again, after fighting, everything else in your life got the volume turned down. Another scene that illustrates violence as that cleansing or state of enlightenment is the chemical burn scene. Tyler kisses the narrator's hand and pours lye on it, which causes severe and very painful chemical burn. The narrator tries to pull away, but is forced to endure. And this is framed by Tyler as a great awakening. After achieving extreme growth and international influence, the Fight Club evolves into organized terrorism. I mentioned that before. And he gives members homework that comes in the form of destroying property and committing arson, all for pushing an ideology against non-materialism and anti-consumerism. And it's a violence for its members that goes from being cathartic to a dangerous weapon to advance Tyler's ideology. Now for key symbols. The other night, I mentioned I'd read Fight Club at a book club, and someone said, "That book sucked. It's just about terrorism." I was shocked that my friend didn't see beneath the surface of the book. So I'm going to break down the key symbolism from the novel because it's worth highlighting. Let's start with Fight Club, which is a symbol of masculinity, repressed so the underground fights that to represent these men's efforts to reclaim their primal identity in a sterile, comfortable corporate world. The author, at the beginning, attends support groups to feel connected with other people, again, despite not actually having these illnesses. And it's after the fruition of Fight Club, it becomes a release valve, a therapy, an act of rebellion against societal norms. And it shows how violence becomes a substitute for creating human connections. Now, what may seem like an act of self-destruction is actually one of creation. Through the blood and pain, its members feel more alive. Almost like a phoenix lighting on fire, only to be reborn. Soap. Quick reminder. Tyler Durden is a traveling soap salesman who takes human fat and turns it into high-quality soap. Eventually, explosives. There's dual symbolism behind this soap. It represents cleanliness, but also corruption. Since the soap is made from human fat, it's literally turning human bodies into a product. Tyler's satire comes from the idea of selling luxury soap to high-end stores, and he even jokes about how rebellion can be commodified. To go a little deeper here, there's a cycle of violence that occurs. Tyler gets his supplies from the human fat of individuals who get liposuction from clinics. Now, since it's typically wealthy consumers that can afford this surgery, it's a consumerism, the fat that creates the fat, which creates the soap, which funds anarchist acts. A lot of witches in that sentence. Next, Marla Singer, the symbol for death and authenticity. Marla is as authentic as can be. She's the narrator's haunt. As she begins to show up to his support groups as a tourist, she then shows up to his non-home that he lives in with Tyler. She's like his mirror. She drifts support groups in search of meaning and really can't quite nail down an identity. She wears thrift clothes and is always with Tyler Durden. To the narrator, she's the truth he can't face. For the narrator, she's the only authentic, real connection keeping him from self-destructive nihilism. Now for Tyler Durden, the alter ego, the anarchist messiah, and a warning. Tyler is everything the narrator represses, such as sexuality, revolution, and strong charisma. To the members of Fight Club, he is a messiah that will deliver them from a corporate consumer society. For the narrator, he's a tyrant, a terrorist. And it's through this discovery of Tyler's real intentions that he becomes a red flag, a warning symbol. He represents the danger of losing balance between rejecting conformity and embracing extreme anarchy and chaos, which is a perfect segue to the next symbol, Project Mayhem, the symbol of a doggy cult-like obedience and conformity. What starts as liberation quickly evolves into authoritarian control. Members of Fight Club lose their individuality by shaving their heads and giving up their names. The great irony, they become the very thing they fought against, becoming a cog in a machine. And there's a quote from Nietzsche that comes to mind when I look at this, the irony of the members joining Fight Club to fight against authoritarianism and becoming nameless and faceless to becoming that. And Nietzsche said, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. If you gaze long enough into the abyss also gazes into you." This idea that when you are surrounded by monsters and you're looking into darkness, eventually you become the darkness and that monster, which I think is what happens here. No, I think it does. Next, the narrator's insomnia, a blurring reality of what's real and what's not. His constant sleepless state represents his disconnect from reality, which ultimately paved the way for Tyler's psychological creation. It's in this state where the narrator feels symptoms of being trapped in a meaningless, nihilistic routine and feels consumerist anxiety. Have you ever felt this before? Going to work day after day, eating, commuting, working, commuting, eating, sleeping to reset, and then repeating. This is that dreaded Groundhog Day syndrome that I mentioned earlier, which can be remedied. And check out the best blog you've ever read that talks about avoiding Groundhog Day in this blog that I'm going to post. Next, the support groups. These represent false healing. Why? The narrator attends groups suffering from the same illness, but he's not sick. He's there to feel emotions. What he's doing is built on lies. It's like taking medicine for the high, not to cure the sickness. This lifestyle and behavior highlights the emptiness of his life. He has to borrow other people's suffering in order to feel alive. Next, the burning hand that we mentioned before with the lie. Have you ever heard the statement, the truth can be painful or the truth will set you free? In this book, pain is the truth. And Tyler teaches the narrator that by creating a chemical burn with light on his hand, he's trying to teach him the lesson that only through pain can he reach true enlightenment. And this moment becomes an anti-spiritual symbol of religious ritual, replacing transcendence with raw suffering. All right, the Nikando explosion. The moment of rebirth for the narrator is when he loses everything. His IKEA-filled condo, or the perfect life, as he refers to it, is annihilated. Through this loss, he gains freedom and is forced to live with Tyler, which puts him on the path of non-materialism. Reading between the lines here and applying this to the real world, have you ever lost your phone or broken your phone, or maybe even just had a day where you weren't able to use your phone? Now, the reason I use this is because for a lot of us, a phone feels like everything. But when the phone is taken away, you're disconnected from everyone. It's liberating. It feels free. And you even notice that your thoughts become more clear. Again, to many of us, our phones may feel and seem like everything. It's a morphine drip at the click of a button, an ego boost, a depressant, an entertainment. When that's taken away, we're free from that digital addiction. I just want to bring that up because it feels the same way where many of us find meaning and we build up our identity through the things that we own. Some of us, all that is put into the digital world, which, funny enough, it isn't real, at least physically. It exists in a conceptual way. Next, travel, which is a symbol for disposable identity and rootlessness. The narrator is on constant business trips, which makes him feel faceless. Now, to quote the book, he describes this as being he himself being single-serving friends and living a single-serving life. It's in this state of drift that he feels alienated and without purpose. Have you felt this before? Now, at work, it's advised to keep friends, but at a distance. Coworkers aren't your real friends. They're your competitors. It's be loved and feared in this world, but if you have to choose, be feared. And when people ask how your weekend was, they don't care. You don't want to rub it in. You just say, fine, and you move on with your day. The reason why I bring this up, and again, this isn't necessarily me sharing from personal experience. I'm just saying kind of best practices and what you hear from a lot of people that go into office. And that is that corporate America is cold and it is faceless. Now let's talk about the movie versus the book. This is one of the few and rare instances where the film is better than the book. However, that doesn't mean they're not amazing works of art. Let's unpack their similarities and differences. The book was released in 1996, and David Fincher's film came out in 1999. They're similar in plot, but diverge in tone, symbolism, and endings. So let's talk about the endings. Big spoiler alert, so please skip ahead if you don't want to know the end, which I think I've already given it away. But the ending of the book is when the narrator ends with the narrator shooting himself in the mouth, believing this will kill Tyler. He wakes up in what he thinks is heaven, but is actually a psychiatric hospital. While there, he meets members of Fight Club, which is now Project Mayhem, who continue to revere him and address him as Sir. So from this change, it's implied that Tyler's influence isn't gone. This ending leaves the reader questioning whether or not the narrator is actually cured. And in the movie, the narrator shoots himself, it kills Tyler, but he lives on to hold hands with Marla as they watch buildings explode as a result of Project Mayhem. It's a spectacular ending where the song Where Is My Mind plays as the screen is engulfed in flames. Cinematic gold, if you ask me. Now, the key difference here is the book ends inwardly while the film ends outwardly. In the book, the conclusion focuses on mental collapse, and the film concludes with the rebellion against consumerism. The tone between the film and book are different. The film is a dark humor comedy and has the ability to use creative visuals. Tyler is played by Brad Pitt, which means he's meant to be a seducer. The book differs in that it's significantly bleaker, darker, and absurd. In the book, Marla Singer is more grotesque and tragic. She's a symbol of death and not a real love interest. In the film, she's still a hot mess, but she's sympathetic. There's a romance with the narrator at the end of the film, which gives a bittersweet human connection at the finale. And Tyler Durden, one of my favorite characters of all time, in the book, he's a lot more blunt and harsh, while the film makes him very likable since it's Brad Pitt playing him. The last point I'll make around symbolism is Project Mayhem. The book portrays Project Mayhem as a satire of fascism, conformity, and the loss of individualism, where the members become cogs in a machine. And it's the same in the film, but since it's a film, we're able to see the shaved heads, uniforms, and chants, which make the danger much more visceral. Now, for key takeaways, this is one of my favorite books because it's relatable, it's deep, it's thought-provoking, and it gives a lot of literary protein to consume and keep you up at night. The messages and symbols in Fight Club all circle back to the conflict between consumerist conformity and destructive authenticity, which is why I think it's relevant and relatable. Palahniuk uses storytelling to warn against the modern concept of manufacturing identity, and that reclaiming it demands some level of destruction. And that doesn't go without another strong warning, and that is that unchecked destruction creates its own prison. I mentioned before, I love the movie. I like it more than the book, but to defend that statement, I'll cite that Chuck Palahniuk, our author, has said that he prefers the film's ending to his own. Google it, fact check me. Now in conclusion, we're the middle children of history who are dropped into an assembly line of corporate culture. Remember, we're in a spiritual war. Let's reclaim our identity, decide our own fate, and like Tyler Durden reminds us, we're more than our jobs and khakis. We are human, we can choose, and we can fight for something greater. Thank you for listening to this episode today. Please give us a follow on YouTube, on Instagram, and anywhere else that you get podcasts where you're listening to this. Thank you very much. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, everyone.